With the release of Lightfall, Bungie tried their absolute hardest to nerf ability spamming builds, but somehow Void Warlock managed to get even better. With this build, we can get our grenade back in just seconds without even getting a single kill, so no matter what content we're doing, we can just infinitely spam our grenades, which obviously does an insane amount of damage and just completely nukes everything. But this also means that we have 100% uptime on Devour, so anytime that we get a kill, we're going to heal to full health, giving us near infinite healing. Every grenade kill also gives an absolute ton of super energy, so we can just spam our Nova Bomb like every 30 seconds, which obviously is very, very good. Not to mention, we can almost do the highest weapon damage possible all by ourselves, not relying on other people because we can debuff targets with our grenades, we get a ton of extra weapon damage with this season's artifact mod, and we have our own Empowering Rift for a total of 61% increase to our weapon damage anytime you want it. This build basically has anything you could ever want it to have, and there's even multiple ways to set it up to better suit your playstyle. If you find the video helpful and you happen to learn something, a like would be greatly appreciated and helps me out a ton. And it turns out something like 90% of the people that watch my Destiny content actually aren't subscribed, so if you like the content, make sure to subscribe for more builds just like this one. Without further ado, let's just get into it. The first and most important choice with this build is which exotic we want to use. Personally, my favorite option for this build is Controverse Hold, giving us a 2000% increase to grenade regeneration rate for 1.75 seconds after our grenade deals damage, and this does have a 4-second internal cooldown. This pairs perfectly with our Vortex Grenade while using the Chaos Accelerant aspect, which actually increases the duration of our Vortex Grenade by a further 25%, so we can benefit from the Controverse Hold regeneration rate twice per grenade. With the right mods, this setup allows us to get our grenade back in just seconds without even needing a single kill, which is especially good for higher end content such as contest mode raids, GM Nightfalls, and anything else you want to do, and in my opinion, it's just the most consistent option, enabling us to just chuck Vortex Grenades out 24/7. Our next best option, which admittedly is an insane amount of fun, is Nothing Manacles, which gives us a second scatter grenade charge, so we now have 2 in total, and it also buffs the tracking of our scatter grenades so they don't just completely whiff all over the place like they do normally. With the release of Lightfall, Bungie actually buffed scatter grenades by reducing their cooldown. As a result, if you're getting enough kills to proc Devour and some of our other mods, you essentially can infinitely spam the scatter grenades. However, if you're doing higher end content, the scatter grenades may not do enough damage to one-shot most of the enemies, therefore making it very difficult to just infinitely spam the grenades. So ultimately, I'd recommend Controverse Hold if you like to use the Vortex Grenade and you want the build to just function very well in high-end content and overall be very consistent. And definitely use Nothing Manacles for lower tier content, solo type stuff, or if you just really like using the scatter grenades. Don't worry though, I'll have dim loadout links in the description for both build options with Controverse Hold and with Nothing Manacles, so feel free to just copy paste the builds from down there. And while you're down there, let me know in the comments what is your favorite Warlock exotic in the game. When it comes to the aspects and fragments, if you're using Controverse Hold, you want to use Chaos Accelerant to enable the charging of your grenades, namely the Vortex Grenades, which is going to give it a 100% increased radius and a 25% increased duration like mentioned before. The radius increase here is extremely good so that our Vortex Grenade truly turns into a black hole and just sucks all the enemies in. If you're using scatter grenades, there's no purpose in using Chaos Accelerant, so you just want to use Child of the Old Gods instead. For both builds, we'll be using Feed the Void, so any ability Final Blow gives us Devour. Devour instantly heals us to full health, and it gives us an instant 20% grenade energy back. Any kills while Devour is active will also fully heal us and give us more grenade energy, with the energy amount that we get being based on which type of enemy we actually kill. Devour is super easy to keep up all the time, and the fact that we heal to full health after every single kill is the main reason this build is so good at surviving. When it comes to our fragments, the most important one is the Echo of Expulsion, causing any void ability Final Blow, mainly our grenades, to do an extra explosion, which is pretty much mandatory to enable our grenades to just blow everything up. Next is Echo of Undermining, causing our grenades to weaken targets, which effectively just makes our grenades do 15% more damage overall, and it of course will just buff any damage that we do to that target after they are weakened. Lastly, if you're using the Vortex Grenade, Echo of Remnants is a great option to increase the overall duration by about 1 second. Honestly, it's not super strong, so you can definitely swap this one out for something like Echo of Persistence to increase the duration of our Devour buff from 10 seconds all the way to 15 seconds, making the build much more reliable. If you're playing Scatter Grenade, because you don't need to use Chaos Accelerant, you gain an extra fragment slot through your aspects, so you want to use Echo of Reprisal as your 4th fragment for more super generation, as none of the other fragments are all that valuable, unless you really need like an extra 10 discipline or resilience to round out your build. Keep in mind that once we no longer have access to Volatile Float in the artifact, we'll definitely want to swap one of our fragments to Echo of Instability so that we can maintain volatile rounds for our weapons. If you're playing Vortex Grenade, you'd want to swap out either Remnants or Persistence, and if you're playing Scatter Grenade, you'd want to swap out either Persistence or Reprisal for instability. In terms of which super to use, I would always recommend Nova Bomb Vortex, as personally I just think it's all around the best option, and it does very strong damage. When it comes to which stats we want, obviously we want to aim for 100 Discipline first and foremost, just further reduce the cooldown of all of our grenades. And next to that, you just want to aim for as much resilience as humanly possible to just increase your damage reduction to give you a whole bunch of survivability. If you happen to have incredibly good gear, after resilience, I would probably go for more intellect just so you can spam Nova Bombs even more, or you could go for recovery for just extra survivability when you're in like a really bad scenario. When it comes to the mods, we're actually going to be using the same ones regardless of which exotic we're using, so you don't really have to worry about that. The core functionality of this build is going to be through the mods. Without the mod setup being correct, this build simply just won't function very well. While you could very easily just copy paste exactly what I have here, I do think that it is very important to entirely understand how the mods function together so that you can better take advantage of the build. I'm going to go over every piece one by one and talk about all the different options that you have, but first I just want to mention the core functionality of the build. Every grenade kill that you get is going to spawn an orb of power. This orb of power is going to make you armor charged, and every orb of power that you get will actually give you 2 armor charge stacks with stacks on stacks. Every orb of power that you spawn is also going to give you a whole bunch of grenade energy regen while having 2 copies of Innervation. You're going to then spend the armor charge stacks that you generated with these orbs on grenade kickstart, giving you roughly half of your grenade back with the right amount of armor charges stacked up. This is the core loop of the build, basically throwing your grenade, getting a kill, spawning an orb, picking up the orb to reduce your cooldown more, getting charged up again, and then you throw your grenade again, and it's going to give you roughly half of it back, and then you just repeat the cycle over and over again. One thing I want to mention, which is incredibly important with this build, is that usually I am not a fan of kickstart mods because it's basically going to delete all of your armor charges anytime that you throw a grenade. The reason that that matters is if you happen to be using a weapon surge mod, you're basically going to be losing out on all of this weapon damage every single time that you throw a grenade, right? So in order to remedy this, we actually have an artifact mod that works perfectly for the build in the form of void weapon channeling, where every kill that we get with our void weapon will give us an increase to our void weapons based on how many abilities we have charged. If you've ever played Void Warlock, you know that the void melee isn't all that good, so the way that we're going to be taking advantage of this is basically just never using the melee, so we permanently have a 10% increase to our weapon damage. If you take this a step further and you don't use your rift all that often, you're also going to have 17% because that's 2 abilities, and if you hold onto your super, you can have 22% at all times. I just wanted to mention that because that's very important, but when it comes to the rest of the mods, obviously you just want to have stat mods across all of your pieces. For the helmet, you want 1 pair of Void Siphon just so you get additional orbs of power every time you get kills with your void weapons. And then I have double Ashes to Assets, which gives you a ridiculous amount of super energy every single time that you get a kill. Alternatively, you could swap this to Heavy Ammo Scout plus Heavy Ammo Finder if you're in a group, but I really like being able to spam the Nova Bomb, and because we're getting so many kills with our grenades, it's just a no-brainer combo there. For the gloves, already mentioned, you want 2 copies of Grenade Kickstart and 1 copy of Firepower. If you for some reason have like absolutely terrible gear, you could lose 1 copy of Grenade Kickstart and go for Font of Focus, which gives you an additional 30 Discipline anytime that you are armor charged, so you'd only need 70. For the chest, you just want to go for straight damage reduction. If you have bad gear like me and you need the extra resilience, I went for Font of Endurance to round out my resilience, but you could also just go for another damage reduction depending on which type of content that you're doing. You could also go for Charged Up if you're getting a ton of orbs and to further take advantage of your Grenade Kickstart mods. When it comes to the boots, we want stacks on stacks to increase our total number of armor charges by 1 every time we pick up an orb of power. Then we want double Innervation, which gives you a massive amount of grenade cooldown back every time you pick up an orb. Lastly, we have our class item. The mods on here aren't really all that important because ultimately I don't like using the rift that much because I like having it for the extra weapon damage through having an additional ability charge. But if you really need your grenade back, you can pop down your rift and this gives you a ton of your grenade back. Time dilation is just for more consistency with the build if you're moving from pack to pack and you want your armor charges to last longer. For our weapons, we obviously want to be using void weapons. I've really been enjoying double special lately so that I can just permanently spam my heavy, especially with the new Bricks from Beyond mod, essentially giving us infinite heavy ammo. Can't go wrong with any sort of void weapon, so honestly just use whatever you prefer. Honorable mention being Wave Splitter, Hollow Denial, Retrofit Escapade, Corrective Measure with Demolitionist, and of course, I love my Wither Horde. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you enjoyed, please be sure to drop a like and subscribe for videos similar to this one.